Step 6. Install the TruGrip system, field slate, and the hip trim slates. Start by installing the TruSlate hip and ridge spacers along the hip, working from bottom to top. Fasten the hip and ridge spacer 24 inches on center on both sides of the hip with 1.5-inch roofing nails or 1.5-inch coated decking screws. Place a 12 3/4 inch wide piece of underblock UV and moisture barrier on top of the hip and ridge spacer. Assure that the underblock membrane is centered over the hip and ridge spacers. Overlap the end joints of the underblock membrane by a minimum of 12 inches. Upon completion of the trim slate, ventilation, and top course of field slates, install the battens in the field at 10-inch intervals, making sure to follow the alignment marks and chalk lines applied to the roof earlier with the lay straight alignment tape. Do not apply all battens at once. These should be applied in 4-course intervals from the top down. Batten spacing may be increased or decreased to accommodate for needed spacing. Battens can be cut with tin snips. Align the battens end to end, maintaining a 6-inch space between hangers for field slates. The end of the batten should stop 1/2 inch from hip spacers, gable, and rake edges. When installing the field slate, start 4 rows down from the ridge and work up to the roof. Continue down the roof deck, working in 4-row increments. Fasten at the center of each hanger, except at gable or rake edges. Position each batten so that hangers are aligned vertically and provide the necessary support. This will create a uniform pattern. Cut the underblock UV and moisture barrier in 10 to 12 foot lengths on the ground so that it's easier to handle on the roof. The shorter pieces also ensure that the expansion of the underblock, usually less than 1%, does not extend past the edge of the roof. If installed in larger sections of 15 to 25 feet, the expansion could be as much as 3 inches, which would stick out from the side of the roof, causing an unappealing look. Lay the underblock membrane along the row of hangers, overlapping side laps at least 12 inches. It should go underneath the hangers above it and over the hangers on the bottom. It should be installed with the dull side up or shiny side down. Do not nail through underblock UV and moisture barrier when installing field slate because it will puncture the waterproofing barrier. Next, install the field slate over the underblock UV and moisture barrier. Field slates are 12 inches wide. Lay the first course of slate by placing the bottom edge of each slate into the top row of hangers, which are pre-installed on 6-inch centers. Be careful that the hangers are evenly spaced on the slate. Each hanger should be 3 inches from the edge of each full piece of slate. Even on smaller slates, care should be taken to ensure 2 hangers support each piece. If a measurement at the edge calls for a piece less than 4 inches wide, the adjacent piece should be cut back so the small piece is a minimum of 4 inches. The cut edges can be placed side by side so the cut edge disappears. On alternate courses, start with a half slate to get the proper keyway offset. This will ensure that there will never be 2 rows with vertical joints aligned. Place additional hangers in the battens if needed to make sure 2 hangers support each slate. Additional hangers are included with each box of battens. A hanger can be easily relocated on the batten to facilitate spacing. It can be relocated by simply squeezing the top wires together, removing it, placing it where it is needed, and snapping the spring wire into place. Here's a tip. A piece of underblock membrane can be used as a shoehorn. Insert it first and slide the slate in under the shoehorn. Remove the shoehorn and repeat. It is easiest to roof the field slate on one side of the hip and then install the trim slate prior to installing the field slate on the opposite slope of the hip. In this case, you only need to shoehorn the field slate underneath the trim slate on one slope. Alternatively, all trim slate can be installed prior to the installation of the field slate, but you'll have to shoehorn the field slate underneath the trim slate on both sides of the hip. Screw or nail in place each trim slate through the 2 pre-drilled holes. Use a minimum 2.5-inch stainless steel nails, coated decking screws, or copper slater's nails. They should be able to wiggle slightly. If desired, each fastener hole can be covered with a weatherproof caulk. Here's a tip. Trim slates that are nailed can easily be removed with a slate ripper if a repair is needed. Each trim slate should have a 6-inch overlap. It should overlap the field slates by a minimum of 2 inches. Do not overdrive the fasteners on trim slates because you do not want to risk cracking the slate. Additionally, proper application should leave some wiggle room to slip a field slate underneath if needed. When the hip is completed, the final ridge trim slates will be installed over the hip to complete the tie-in. Even if you decide to install an entire ridge of trim slate before the slopes are completed, the ridge spacers or ridge vent should be installed first to allow for the slope planning and layout. Any underblock membrane visible after the ridge or hip is installed can be carefully trimmed with a utility knife.